Tell me, what is the role of River Ganga when it comes to the physical and human geography of Uttar Pradesh?
What is moonlighting, and do you think like it is okay or not okay?
Do you think bifurcation of Bihar was a policy mistake by the central government?
Can you please briefly tell me what is the procedure for registration of one NGO?
Do you think India is actually harming its interests by not giving recognition to the Taliban?
May I come in, sir?
Yes, please.
Morning, sir. Morning, ma'am. Morning, sirs.
Good morning. Please sit down.
Thank you, sir.
You're Rupal Srivastava. Rupal, will English be your preferred medium?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you're comfortable?
Yes, sir.
Fine, then let us start. To begin with, please tell us something about yourself.
So, my name is Rupal Srivastava. I have been born and brought up in Gorakhpur, Uttar Pradesh. I have done my graduation in Electronics and Communication Engineering from NIT Jamshedpur. And after that, I have worked for the Tata Motors at the Pune plant. Thereafter, I decided to go for a full-fledged preparation of civil services.
You completed your graduation from NIT,
Yes, sir.
NIT Jamshedpur.
Yes, sir.
And I can see your CGPA was 9.77,
Yes, sir.
which is obscene to say the least. And still, you're here to become a babu. What happened to those wonderful CGPA scores? Those the entire sweat you actually devoted there.
So, having a good CGPA, I believe I take it as a positive remark because it shows my dedication and hard work no matter wherever I have been. Coming to my motivation for joining civil services is that I wanted to come for a sector where I can make a direct impact on the lives of people at the grassroots level. And so, secondly, we often see various socio-economic challenges around us, but what attracts me for this service is the decision-making ability to bring some changes, right from policy implementation to policy formulation.
You work with Tata Motors. You are an electronics engineer.
Yes, sir.
Why an electronics engineer will go to a automobile company? What are the applications of electronics nowadays in automobile industry?
So, there are multiple applications. First thing is that to begin with the manufacturing process of vehicles. Now, most of the assembly lines, they are run on PLC machines, programmable logical controllers, which are electronic devices. So, secondly, electronics forms a very essential component of the automobile itself. The various communication systems within the vehicle are also electronically controlled. And so, thirdly, in the rising era of electric vehicles, electronics and semiconductors especially will play a major role.
You're from Gorakhpur, right?
Yes, sir.
Since you have studied geography as your optional, tell me, what is the role of River Ganga when it comes to the physical and human geography of Uttar Pradesh?
So, Ganga being the longest river running through Uttar Pradesh, coming on to the physical significance of Ganga. So, firstly, since it flows through the fertile alluvial plains, the floodplains of Ganga make Uttar Pradesh the most important agrarian state of India. So, secondly, River Ganga and their tributaries have a very important role in disaster perspective. For example, frequent flooding of its channels can create issues which need to be managed. And so, economically, again, I would say agriculture forms the mainstay because of River Ganga and its tributaries.
Rupal, I was going through your DAF and it appears that you are a very privileged child. Both your parents working at nice places, and overall you studied from nice institutions. Do you believe that you are too privileged to become a civil servant?
So, my parents' background, professional background, has indeed been a blessing to me because it has allowed me to pursue the education of my choice and even work for and even decide to prepare for this exam, taking a decision on my own. But sir, having said that, since my father is in public services, I have also got a chance to hear from it the various issues which are prevalent in our society with regards to development. And so I think that this has offered me an insight to which motivates me to come for civil services.
Anyways, thank you. So,
Rupal, what is the city management organization in Jamshedpur? Who is responsible to manage the city?
So, in Jamshedpur, the municipal corporation is managed by the Tatas mainly. Along with that, sir, there are various other industrial clusters which have their own management setup. For example, the Adityapur cluster. So, this much I'm aware.
And what is the rank of Jamshedpur in sanitation index? Swachhata?
Sorry, sir, I'm not yet aware of it.
Not aware. Okay. After this demonetization and GST, large number of small enterprises in Jamshedpur became sick and they were closed down. That created a huge unemployment in that area. What do you think should have been the precautionary measure of the government before announcing such disruptive policy measures?
So, the major goal with which demonetization was brought was to curb black money and the fake Indian currency notes. However, it is also evident that there were certain small scale industries which were mainly dependent on cash, and they faced some sort of issues in the process of demonetization. So, I believe to make it more effective, there could have been a hand-holding support to these enterprises so that they could have continued their basic manufacturing activities and not bear the brunt of demonetization directly in the short term, sir.
Even the recent pandemic, large number of enterprises has been closed down, and so the unemployment rate in Jharkhand has reached now more than 18%, while in the neighboring Odisha it is just 0.9%, in West Bengal it is 5.5%. Do you think the government at a state level is also not very sensitive to this issue of unemployment?
So, unemployment as an issue has been highlighted by the government of Jharkhand also, and at an India level also. But yes, since Jharkhand is a tribal majority
Odisha
of the population.
is also tribal but having unemployment rate of 0.9%.
So, I think so. The model of development which we can go for in Jamshedpur, since it is a very mineral rich area, is for small scale manufacturing industries which needs a push. Like there are certain large clusters, for example, we have Bokaro, Dhanbad, Tatanagar to say, but we also need to have a cluster based approach so that smaller industries, ancillary sectors, they can be supported along with these industries.
Do you think bifurcation of Bihar was a policy mistake by the central government?
So, I do not consider it as a mistake, because if we go by the developmental indicators post bifurcation, there has been an improvement in the parameters of Jharkhand, especially in terms of the state GDP. So, this wouldn't be called a mistake, but yes, there is always a scope of improvement so as to make it more inclusive.
Okay. You have kept IPS as 5th preference and IFS as 6th preference.
Yes, sir.
And IRS as 2nd and 3rd preference. So of course, you perhaps like tax administration. Can you tell us who was the chairperson of the Tax Administration Reforms Commission?
I'm sorry, sir. I'll read more about this.
Okay. At the Bali summit of the WTO in 2007, a decision was taken to reform the revenue administration relating to trade. Can you elaborate on that resolution?
Sorry, sir. I cannot recollect it right now.
Okay.
Read more on
The
this.
budget making process, the parliament and the state legislatures are involved. So within the budget making process, different deficits are reported. Can you tell us how many deficits are recorded in Indian budget making nowadays?
So, the first is the fiscal deficit. So, along with that, we have the primary deficit, which is also recorded in the budget.
Fiscal deficit and primary deficit. Any other deficit?
So, there are other deficits also, like the revenue deficit and the capital deficit also.
There is an effective revenue deficit also, along with revenue deficit. Can you point out the distinction between effective revenue deficit and revenue deficit?
Yes, sir. So, the revenue deficit is the deficit arising out of the day-to-day expenditure and earnings of the government. Effective revenue deficit is the revenue deficit minus the revenue expenditure, which leads to some sort of asset creation in the states. So, that is effective revenue deficit. as per my awareness.
Okay. The classification of budget into revenue budget and capital budget is based on which parameters?
So, as far as I can think of, it is based on the duration of the investments, the long-term effect, the time frame.
Okay. So, what is the duration?
So, I'm not exactly aware of.
Okay, my final question. As a student of geography, you have studied Weber's location theory. What is isotim in his theory?
The isotims are those lines which join the places which have equal transport cost from a particular center.
Okay. There is a policy of the central government that is called freight equalization policy. Has it any linkages to isotim?
So, can I take a few seconds to recollect? Yes, sir. So, as per the concept of isotims, as the distance increases, the transport or the freight costs also increases. So, to have this, the policy of rationalization is mainly that those industries which are situated away from the raw material source or the market source, they do not face any disadvantage because of their location. So, it was a uniform rate per distance, I think so, that was imposed on.
So, do you think this freight equalization policy has put Jharkhand and eastern states in disadvantaged position?
No, sir, I do not think so.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Rupal, so you have been associated with one NGO called Sankalp, right? Can you please briefly tell me what is the procedure for registration of one NGO?
So, the NGOs in India, they are registered under the Societies Act, and so they make, I do not know the exact procedure of registration.
Okay, then leave it. So also tell me, since you have a background of NGO, not only government of India, but a host of NGOs are dedicating themselves to bring about changes in the society, right? The government of India, by way of introducing interventionist policies, measures, and NGOs, they are pulling huge fund even from outside the country and dedicating for the marginalized section of the society. But why it is commonplace in a small locality that people are not in their net? For example, if you take 10 kilometers right from here to any direction, you will come across people begging around, transgenders coming to your vehicle and begging for alms, and the lot many things which basically jeopardizes the aesthetics of a place. Why, despite the presence of these two agencies, they are not there? They are not being taken care of.
So, to begin with, the presence of NGOs. So, every NGO has a particular agenda, a goal which it works for. So, even after the presence of NGOs for such marginalized people like beggars, etc., the problem is that the NGOs often lack resources in terms of manpower to make an effect. So, secondly, the NGOs also face financial constraints to execute their task properly. And so, thirdly, making NGOs is not just is just one thing, I believe. There also needs to be bridging of the trust deficit. Like a person who's begging on street would not actually trust anybody who's coming to him for help or going to the NGO. So these are certain factors which I feel have restricted the full impact of NGOs.
Based on your understanding about the profile of NGOs, can you please conveniently say that NGO is also a kind of entrepreneurship? It is also a place where money can be made.
So the NGOs are not for the purpose of profit, to say, but yes, whatever financial transactions are involved in an NGO, they should be utilized for the goal for which the NGO is used. It shouldn't be included as a part of the profit of NGO, I would say.
Okay, you have been president of Hostel Executive Committee, right?
Yes.
Let me ask a question related to the office of president. Can you please tell me a group of people who actually participate in the process of election of the president, but they do not have any say when it comes to removal of the president from its office for the violation of constitution?
So the elected member of legislative assemblies.
That's all?
So they participate in the election, but they do not have a role in removal.
Who else? Elected members of all the legislative assemblies?
Yes, sir.
And? So you are not able to recall. Okay. So tell me, you must have heard about this CIC, Central Information Commission.
Yes.
It is the apex appellate body when it comes to implementation of Right to Information Act. But of late, it is being said that this commission has lost its relevance because certain powers it was actually invested with have been divested with, and also the orders issued by CIC are not being implemented in many segments. Do you also agree with this viewpoint?
So, going by some of the reports which have been put in public domain, the rate of rejection of the information requests has been quite higher, somewhere around 40% as far as I have read. So yes, this is an aspect which has hindered the effectiveness of the RTI or the CICs which had been created. Having said that, sir, there is also a need to have a security of tenure for the information commissioners so that they can have an independent working. So these are the two aspects, I think so, which we need to work upon.
Okay. Do you know something about this POXO Act of 2012?
Yes,
What
sir.
does POXO stand for?
The Prevention of Child Sexual, sorry sir, I'm
Prevention of Children from Sexual Offences Act, right? So can you please tell me, when it comes to implementation of this particular act, what are the challenges that we are facing?
So one of the foremost challenges with regard to the age, like the age which is mentioned in POXO Act is 18 years. However, there has been recent issues with regard to the consensual acts amongst the minors, which has actually dragged them into the POXO case. So the second thing is the investigative delays. For example, the forensic reports, etc. They take on an average a time of 1 to 1.5 years, which delays the overall investigation in the POXO Act.
Okay. My last question to you, MLAs also participate in the election of president, right? Can you please tell me how the vote of an MLA is calculated?
So can I take a few
Yes,
seconds?
5 seconds only.
So first of all, the value of vote of sorry sir, I would
No
work
issues.
on this more.
Rupal, you're interested in mandala art.
Yes, ma'am.
Where is the origin of this art form?
Ma'am, the origin of this art form can be first of all traced to Vedic age also, and then eventually it has been very well practiced in the period of Buddhism.
To which Veda would you trace it to?
I do not know the exact Veda, but it has been used in the rituals, like the art forms which we make on the floor while performing.
It has
the
been
rituals.
mentioned in one of the Vedas.
I'll read it.
Anyway, what are the elements of mandala art?
Ma'am, there are various elements of mandala art. The first thing is that it has geometric figures, for example, the circle, the triangle, and the dot.
What do each of these represent?
Ma'am, each of these has a different significance. For example, the circle, it symbolizes the continuity. The dot, it represents the cosmos, the convergence of all the power into one point. Ma'am, I'm not exactly aware of what the triangle symbolizes.
The triangle have two different meanings for the direction that they are placed in. There are also, while you are drawing the mandala, you divide it into 8 segments. What do these 8 lines represent?
Ma'am, these 8 lines represent the 8-fold path which has been suggested by Gautam Buddha.
Right. There is also a philosophy about going from periphery towards the center of the circle. What does it signify?
Ma'am, going from the periphery towards the center, it means that going away from the worldly materialistic attractions towards having a more spiritual intent. And ma'am, this pattern of convergence has also been used as a very psychotherapeutic tool by one of the famous personality, Carl Jung, to assess the psychosocial health of people.
Right. Where recently, where has one of the largest mandala art done?
Ma'am, it's in Liverpool, England.
Right. Since you are also a student of geography, can you tell me why is it that most of the coral reefs are found in the eastern coast of the world?
Ma'am, there can be a reason which I can think of is that it differs from latitude to latitude. If you look at the tropics at the eastern coast, we generally have upwelling process. So that creates recycling of nutrients and oxygens, which helps in the flourishing of corals.
Is upwelling limited to the eastern coast only?
Ma'am, if we go by the coastal edge, it is limited to the eastern coast. but also at the equator, we also find equatorial upwelling because of the Ekman transport.
Right. But in India, if you must have observed that most of the coral reefs are on western coast. Why is that anomaly in India?
Ma'am, I would read more about this.
Okay. Anyway, recently Ooty has recorded sub-zero temperatures, which is very strange for a place like Ooty. Can you tell me the geographical phenomena working over here?
Ma'am, I need to read more on this.
Okay. The Chinese economy has recently opened up after having the zero COVID policy for this long. As a student of electronics, can you tell me its impact on global economy and India as well, both positive and negative for India?
Ma'am, the first thing is that opening of Chinese economy will help India in a way that we rely majorly on our imports of semiconductors. Approximately 80% of our imports, they come from China. So the supply chain disruptions which had happened, for example, the automobile sector which was suffering from the shortage of chips, it will help to address that factor. And ma'am, this would be the benefit. But if we look at the disadvantage side, then again we can see a widening of our trade deficit also, because the imports will eventually increase. And also ma'am, the firms which were now intended on shifting out of China, they can again give a second thought of staying in and not coming to India. So this can be a disadvantage.
Okay, my last question to you. It has been seen that China has been building a series of dams, and they are being termed as water bombs by China. Can you tell me the geological or geographical impact of these dams on India and the surrounding areas where these dams are being built?
Ma'am, firstly, since the dams are mainly being built in the Himalayan region, which is a seismically active zone of zone 4 or zone 5. So it poses a risk of reservoir-induced seismicity in areas around us. And secondly, these dams will alter the natural flows of the river, and sudden release of water from these dams can create the menace of flooding, as we have frequently seen in the Brahmaputra. So these can be the two challenges.
Is there an apprehension that some of the Indian rivers may dry up? If yes, which rivers?
Ma'am, drying up would be an extreme statement, I would say, because since these rivers are perennial in nature and they are fed by the glaciers.
But they would be dammed.
Ma'am, their flows would reduce the natural e-flows of the river.
So which rivers would that be?
Ma'am, it could be the Brahmaputra river, also some of the smaller tributaries of the Ganga, for example, Ghagra, Rapti, etc. So these can face the issue of drying up.
Okay, thank you, Rupal.
Rupal, what do you understand by this term geopolitics, and is it now playing second fiddle to geoeconomics?
So as per my understanding, geopolitics, it refers to the changes which are taking place in the political sphere across the world, whereas geoeconomics is mainly related to the economic activities of trade in the world.
So which has become more prominent these days in international relations?
So both have their own significance. For example, if we look at the geoeconomic front, there has been an issue of rising protectionism and trade wars which is continuing. But also at the geopolitical front, we see the disputes which are ongoing in various parts.
Is anything wrong with a country protecting its own industries? What is wrong with protectionism?
The protectionism and protecting domestic industries, I would see them as two different things. Protectionism has
They do not have any connection whatsoever?
So they do have, but protectionism is mainly done with an intent which can hamper the global trade balance. Whereas protection of domestic industries is a positive idea, where the domestic industry which is protected can in turn contribute to the global value chains.
Okay. Do you think India is actually harming its interests by not giving recognition to the Taliban regime in Afghanistan when it is in power, and there doesn't seem to be any viable opposition to it which can take over from Taliban?
So presently, India has always focused on its national interest with regard to Taliban. And so giving a recognition right now is something which India has adopted a wait and watch strategy, because how things unfold in the due course of time is something to be seen.
What is Arogya Maitri project?
So I'm not aware of it.
Okay. You are an electronics and communication engineer also. Tell me, what is 5G?
So 5G is the fifth generation of telephony communication. It is an improvement over the existing communication technologies in terms of the speed which it offers. it is approximately 50 to 100 Gbps.
Okay, I want to know, like 5G, will it require more number of towers or less number of towers as compared to 4G?
So the number of towers required would be more, but the size of the towers would be lesser as
Why?
compared to. So because the first thing is that the wavelength of the frequency of the 5G spectrum is on a higher end. Therefore, the wavelength would be lesser. So the size of the towers would reduce. But since the frequency is on the higher end, there would be more of distortion and attenuation of the signals.
Right.
So more number of.
Rupal, there was this controversy over hijab in Karnataka. Supreme Court has also given its verdict, but which is a split verdict. So, what is your view? Whether access to education should have precedence, or the institutions, education institutions, right to inform or enforce a dress code?
So I think so that access to education has to be of prime importance, but at the same time, every institution has its own code of conduct and rules of discipline, which must be adhered to. If the institution
But
has
a choice needs to be made, right? So then, on which side will you lean and why?
So I would lean for access to education for all.
Okay. Now you come from Gorakhpur, right? What is Nath Sampradaya and how is it connected to governance of UP?
So Nath Sampradaya, it traces its roots to somewhere around 1400 AD. And so these the people belonging to these Sampradaya, they do not believe in the caste system existing. And as a result, some of the priests of the temple, the Gorakhnath temple, they are non-Brahmins, which can be seen there.
Okay. And like how is it connected to UP governance currently?
So if we look at governance, the Nath Sampradaya, the Gorakhnath temple, which belongs to
Who is the chief minister of UP?
Mr. Adityanath Yogi.
Okay.
He's the current Mahant of
correct. Last question to you. You also have geography optional. Now, Japanese encephalitis, it has been very endemic to Gorakhpur. Now, what is the reason, geographical reason for this?
So geographically, I can think of one reason, that since Gorakhpur is a terai belt and the geographical topography is saucer shaped, so therefore we have seen frequent instances of water logging. And this Japanese encephalitis is mainly spread by the mosquito, Culex mosquito. So these waterborne puddles, they provide breeding grounds for such mosquitoes.
Right, Rupal, my final question to you. What is moonlighting, and do you think like it is okay or not okay?
So moonlighting refers to when an employee in a company resorts to working for some other company after the work hours. So if we look at moonlighting, there needs to be a look at two reasons. The first thing is that the economic factor as to why the employee needs to go for work for some other sector. If it is because of economic insecurities and social insecurity in his current work, the companies need to ensure that they support their employees fully. But sir, secondly, there is also an ethical aspect which is attached to moonlighting.
Okay, just on issue of ethics, is it right or not?
So if it goes against the interests of the permanent employer, it is indeed unethical.
Thank you, sir.
What exactly is mansplaining?
Sorry, sir.
Gaslighting?
So gaslighting, if I may say something. So gaslighting, as far as I have understood, is making somebody doubt about their own acts, or putting them into that phase where they doubt whether what they have done is something wrong or not.
Okay. Rupal, you mentioned that you worked on PLCs.
Yes, sir.
Imagine a situation that you're stranded on some island, deserted island. You have a PLC and a few electronic component. What will you build to ensure your survival?
So since PLC, if it is a standalone PLC,
you have some components as well. You have a few motors. You may have think of a few electronic components.
So if the PLC is connected via a network, I would say communication network, to something on mainland, I can use it as an input-output signal communicator to raise a request. But beyond that, I cannot think of anything right.
Fine, Rupal. Nice talking to you. Your interview is over. You can go.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Your interview is on 2nd of Feb.
Yes, sir.
It is going to be your first interview at the UPSC, right? You're happy with your performance today?
So there are few things which I think so. So the first thing is that if I'm not aware of any answer, I should resist it before getting into it. And so maybe the last question of moonlighting could have been better.
Just stumbled upon, but I mean, idea was to see whether you're able to wriggle out of it or not. That's the idea.
Yes.
More or less you're able to, but then there is no other way, and that's the only way you can handle it. You cannot actually accept that, which is fine. Rupal, overall you're a good candidate. Your interview is almost here. I mean, there isn't much time, but you don't need any more time either. So overall you're prepared. Your walk-in is good, your sitting posture is good, your voice level is perfect. In general, your communication parameters in place, so don't worry about these things. As far as content is concerned, you're right. I mean, this was the feedback given to me by my colleagues as well on your making false attempts. Right? You can avoid that.
Yes.
It's very simple that if you know the answer, deliver the answer. If you don't know the answer, simply say sorry. It is only when you partially know the answer and you believe that you want to attempt it, then take the prior permission and then attempt it. Otherwise, you need not, because it doesn't matter actually. See, however, if you deliver an answer which you are not sure of, it actually affects badly, right? So you can think of that. But overall, in general, things are good. There are a few places where it appears that though you have worked on your DAF, but still there are few spots where you can further revise. For example, since you got for the revenue services before police service and foreign service, then it makes sense that you do read about taxation and all. That will be helpful. Similarly, you're a geography student. This UT thing is strange, so look at it, you'll realize. But it is not being suggested that the same questions will be asked, right? But the idea is that you should be aware of what's happening around. So overall, in general, you're doing things fine. So what you need to do right now is just keep your head cool. It is you don't have much time with you at your hand, so don't change your strategy or your planning drastically, because then it will be difficult to manage.
Yes.
You're already ready to go for the interview. Just keep it the way it is. Work on other things. Keep your mind free. Don't take too many suggestions now, right? And if you take suggestion, implement only the suggestion which you believe this time window will allow you to do, and you should also keep that elbow space that you can come back if you believe it's not working, right?
Yes,
so these are the few things I wanted to suggest. I'm sure you'll do very good in interview, so don't worry about it, right? All the best.
Sir,
Yeah.
I just had one doubt, like about making eye contacts. So, sir, like,
I
should
understand that
be-
there are school of thoughts. There are
Yes,
people who
sir.
believe that you should be looking at many person at the same time. Anybody understand it's not natural human way of communicating. So I am from the school of thought which believe that you should be looking at the person you're talking to, not staring, not just fixated, but looking at the person you're talking to. You can have a fleeting glance here and there, but if I'm talking to you and I'm looking at you, I will have your trust.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, I will not have. So that you can follow if you're convinced about it, right? All the best.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.